It's an absolute privilege to spend the morning or afternoon with the group wherever you find yourselves today. And so I wanted to say thank you out of the gate. Elise has some excellent content prepared for today's session. Before I hit that, I just wanted to share the quickest note about Fathom and some context for the content that we'll walk through later today. So, Fathom, in case you aren't aware, is the leading digital marketing agency for healthcare. We work with hospitals and health systems to drive brand awareness, increase patient acquisition, engage target audiences, whomever they might be. Our specialties include paid media, SEO, marketing automation, plus the strategy and measurement required to maximize the effectiveness of those channels. Given Elisa's title, you might assume that we also support our clients and Fathomers in understanding and adopting AI because we believe and have found it to be a really helpful tool to basically do better marketing. And that's something we're going to talk about today. With that, wanted to share just a bit of context to set up the broader conversation. The fact of the matter is, everyone's talking about AI. It's hard to separate hype from reality, right? Many of us are trying to make sense of the opportunity that artificial intelligence and different tools present us as marketers. The fact is, the majority of us are just a little bit overwhelmed, right? And so our goal today is to change that, to allow for confidence, whether you're exploring artificial intelligence, adopting tools, bringing them to your team, or anything in between. The reason we think that's important, and I'm guessing the reason you're here today, is because we believe AI is a helpful tool, an effective partner that allows us to do our most important work better and more efficiently. And so that's true whether we're personalizing content for audiences and channels, strengthening the strategy with deep research, unlocking the data that is at our fingertips but has been elusive in the past, or doing any of that more efficiently. So, what we're going to cover over the course of the next 30 to 40 minutes rolls up to three things, right? So, Elise is going to help us arrive at a common definition for AI and maybe illuminate that it's been more present in our marketing work than we might think. Prompting is foundational to using different AI tools, especially large language models. And so Elise will share some rules and practical examples of the basics for prompting. And then finally, it's not enough to be interested or try to explore new tools. And so Elise will share some best practices for adoption from our own experience, not only in support of clients in healthcare, but as an agency understanding how might we use these tools to do marketing better. And so that's enough, Joe, for now. With that, I'd love to introduce Elise, Fathom's Associate Director of AI Solutions, to share some excellent content that you've all been looking forward to.
Great. Thank you, Joe. So yeah, we're going to get started with some basic definitions. I think that's maybe one of the first things that could be overwhelming when it comes to AI is just all of the acronyms associated with it and trying to figure out what exactly everything means. So this visual kind of shows what that looks like just from most broad to most specific. So the kind of umbrella term is AI, artificial intelligence, that encapsulates all of these things. AI has been around for years and years, and it basically describes the ability for a machine or a computer to do things that humans can do, and specifically doing specific tasks that humans can do. You may have also heard of AGI or artificial general intelligence, and that is when we reach a point where computers or machines can do essentially all things that humans can do instead of just specific tasks. So right now, where we're at in the state of AI is having the ability to automate specific tasks or work. And then within that sits machine learning, which has also been around for a while now. And this is when computers or machines are able to learn from data and recognize patterns. So this is already built into a lot of advertising platforms. If you're using things like smart bidding in Google Ads, you're using machine learning and artificial intelligence today in some capacity, even if it doesn't necessarily feel that way, or maybe you haven't realized that. In a personal level, you could think of this like the Netflix recommendations that you see when you log in. Every time you log in, you get personalized recommendations tailored to you, and that's based on the algorithm and understanding what you've watched in the past. It's not hard coded there just specifically for you. It's just the machine learning over time what it is that you're interested in. And then deep learning is a little bit more specific than machine learning and gets into things like image recognition or speech to text. And this is where we get to more human-like thinking. It actually starts to mimic the human brain a little bit. And you can think of applications for deep learning and things like chatbots. So as you engage maybe with the health system and you're trying to schedule an appointment or find information, the chatbot that you're engaging with is likely built on some deep learning principles that allow it to operate the way that it does. And then most specifically, and I would say most recently, the way that we've all been interacting with AI is in the form of LLMs or large language models. And so a lot of the tools that you've probably heard of, maybe you've experienced or explored a little bit, things like ChatGPT or Claude, those are all types of large language models or LLMs. And so those are specific models that are trained on enormous sets of data, and the way that humans engage with those models is through language, and the output of those models is some form of language as well. So you can kind of think of those as an application or a specific type of AI. And so, a little bit about what AI is and isn't. Like Joe said, it's kind of hard to separate hype from reality at this point. There's a lot of scary things in the news as it relates to what AI is. There's a lot of helpful things, and it's hard to kind of figure out where we stand today. So, I would say our approach at Fathom is that we really view AI as a thought partner, and would encourage you all to think about it that way as well. It's definitely not at a place where it replaces human expertise. So we really look at it as a tool to enhance human expertise. It works best when it's working with you and when you're applying the context and the knowledge that comes with you and your role and your expertise to AI to make you and the tool perform better. And it also requires human oversight. So while it can feel super autonomous and the outputs that AI generates are often really impressive, it still does require some human manipulation at the end of the day to make sure that everything's buttoned up, and aligns with how you would want it to be presented to a stakeholder. And then in terms of what it is not, sort of the opposite of those things. So we definitely don't view it as a replacement for human insight. If you have a large skill gap on your team, maybe you don't have anyone who can generate creative, you don't have any creative resources. I wouldn't view AI as a replacement for an entire skills gap at this point. That's a little bit risky just in current state. But if you have maybe a junior analyst on your team and you want to do more data analysis, you could look at AI as a tool to level up existing analytical capabilities. So it's not a replacement for, but it is a supplement to human insight. And then it's not a threat, it's our friend. You can engage with AI safely and feel like it is complementing your work. If any of you have experienced or experimented with AI, just even in things like writing emails or even on a personal level, I know people who use it to make grocery lists and things like that. It's really a helpful partner. And the more that you treat it that way and engage with it that way, I think the more you'll get out of it. And it's also not fully autonomous. You probably heard a lot about AI agents in recent news, and we're starting to get into more of an autonomous world as it relates to AI. Still involves some human oversight and intervention, but the LLMs are by no means autonomous at this point, and they do require your engagement to get the right outputs out of them. So a little bit about what we mean when we say we use AI for marketing, because even that can be a bit ambiguous. Like what are you actually saying? How are you actually using AI? And for us at Fathom, and what I've seen a lot of health systems doing is really evaluating some existing AI tools, things like ChatGPT or Perplexity, Fathom Note Taker, etc., and applying those to existing processes. So whether that's strategy and planning or executing a paid search campaign, reporting on the results of of a campaign, really finding ways that existing AI tools can help plug into those existing processes and make them better or more efficient. So that's what we mean when we say thinking through how we use AI in marketing. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And then in the session on the 15th, give some more overviews around specifically how we plug these tools into entire processes. So getting into prompting for AI, this is definitely a very basic level. This is kind of the first entry point that you need to know as you get started with AI. It's how you communicate with AI. It's how you get the most out of AI. Something that we've seen a lot as we've started to engage with AI more in our business is that we've all kind of been trained as humans to search for things in a really weird way over time, right? Google has trained us. If you're looking for a new car, you might just type SUV into the search bar. If you just typed SUV into ChatGPT, it would be like, what are you doing? What's wrong? Are you okay? And so we have to kind of unlearn traditional search practices and learn how to engage with AI in a way that gets us the results that we're looking for. So we're going to talk about some specifics as it relates to just 101 level best practices for prompting, and then we'll show you some examples of what that might look like put into action. So just some basic principles to be aware of as it relates to prompting. First and foremost, being clear. And I like to specify that you should really focus on telling the AI what to do and not how to do it. AI has infinite resources and it might find a better workaround or way to get at your desired deliverable in a way that you haven't even thought of accomplishing that before. So really giving it the space to think about how to best execute an ask, but being really specific upfront about what you're looking to get out of it so that at the end, when it produces a result, you're happy with it and can take it and put it into your work. So really defining what it is that your goal is and what type of output you're looking for is key. So things like if you're specifying that you'd like it to conduct competitive messaging research and share back the main messaging themes that you're seeing. A lot of times, especially as the models are becoming more advanced, they have a tendency to over-index on the results that they're giving you, so they can be quite lengthy. So if you want something that's just really simple for you to digest, asking it to deliver things in bullet points or in a short 1 to 2 sentences, something like that will help make sure that you're getting the level of specificity and the type of output that you're looking for. And then the next principle is providing context. So if you really want AI and the results that you get when engaging with AI to be super turnkey and something that you can just pick up and take into your work, then the more context you provide, the better. You'll still get a decent result if you don't provide a ton of context, but it's likely going to take a little bit more work for you to finesse and sort of wrap your world around it versus if you give it that context up front, the output that AI is going to deliver is going to feel a lot more relevant and applicable to your work from the get-go. So some things that you could consider as context would be providing it a campaign brief, uploading some recent performance reports. Something else that I really like to do is have the LLM do the work for itself. So you don't need to necessarily feel the burden of teaching the model all about what it is you do and the campaign that you're about to launch. You can have it reference publicly available information as much as possible so that it can do some of that work for itself. So, for example, if you were going to launch a lung cancer campaign, you could have it look at the lung cancer section of your website and do some basic research to understand the treatments that you offer and the types of screenings that you offer and things like that so that it's educating itself without you having to document all of that for it. And then lastly is iterating and refining. So we keep it really simple from a prompting standpoint. Less is more when it comes to what you give it at the onset. And I would say I've seen that evolve over time as AI has become more sophisticated. I think when things like ChatGPT were first starting to become really popular, there was a lot of time spent in making sure that you were crafting the perfect prompt and right out of the gate, making sure that you were giving AI all of the information it could possibly need made. And as the algorithms and the models have evolved, so has the way that we interact with AI. So I would always encourage you to start simple as it relates to prompting, and then you can't hurt its feelings. So you can go back and you can ask for clarity or ask it to do something again or give it feedback as much as you want to get to an output that feels right for you without having to worry about getting it right the first time, especially as the models get more advanced, like the new ChatGPT model. It actually is kind of empathetic. And so it recognizes when it doesn't deliver things in the way that you asked and it wants to do better. So giving it some encouragement is definitely helpful along the way.
At this stage, Elise, we're going to jump into some specific examples to give you a chance to catch your breath and take a glass of water. I'm going to take this opportunity to encourage folks as we walk through these examples, ask questions. We're happy to address questions live while the slide's up or at the end of the session. And so if there's a curiosity on your mind, drop it into the Q&A functionality. I think if you hit the more three dots, you'll be able to engage with us that way. I have the panel open on my screen, and we'll make sure that Elise fields the question. So, Elise, back to you and some examples.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder. So the first example that we pulled forward is one around creative brief development. So I know that this is something that as marketers can be really time consuming. So once you have an idea for a campaign, making sure that you're documenting all of the relevant detail in a way that's helpful for creative services to actually build out the assets or for your media agency to plan the campaign. It's a lot of work and there's a lot of pieces that are part of a successful creative brief. And we've found that AI is a super helpful resource to turn to sort of fill in some of those gaps, add additional context to the pieces of the brief, and ultimately make the brief a lot more robust, which informs better creative, more strategic media planning. There's lots of benefits associated with it. So for something like this, you might employ a tool like ChatGPT. And you might focus on developing a brief for a creative approach for an upcoming campaign. And so, some ways that AI can be a resource to you in this process would be things like analyzing competitor messaging to help you understand where you might stand out. Exploring the patient mindset to better understand needs and motivators is something that we like to use AI to do a lot. I would say that that is more anecdotal and less fact-based, but you could prompt AI to sort of explore the mindset of someone who was recently diagnosed with cancer. What are the things that they're looking to hear from a health system to make them feel confident in choosing to get care at your health system versus another? So there's a lot that you can do in terms of sort of persona building and exploring what someone might be looking to hear from you as a health system. Or you might even use it to review past messaging or campaign performance to make sure that in this flight you're bringing forward the best of the best and that you're learning from what's worked well and what hasn't in the past. So, on the prompt on the right of your screen, you can see some of those best practices that we just went over from a prompting standpoint come to life. So, imagine putting a prompt like this into ChatGPT. We're being really clear upfront about the fact that we want it to help us provide a brief, and we're specifying specifically what elements of the brief that we'd like to include. So, the campaign objective, audience insights. And we're giving it a little bit of context. We're running a campaign, we've given it the location, we've given it a little bit of information about the target audience and the goal of the campaign. And then in this instance, also have directed it to some information about a past campaign that we ran. So we're providing that context there. And then the last section of that prompt, you can see it, we're telling it in advance that we're going to ask for refinements or give it some feedback. You don't necessarily have to spell that out when you're prompting AI, but definitely feel free as it generates results to go back and give it feedback. Something that I like to do too if I'm stuck and a prompt isn't quite getting me what I want is just simply asking the LLM, what additional information could I provide to help make this better? And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised just how good of a job it does at saying, like, if I had context around these things, if I had more detail about the target audience, I would be able to give you a better output. And so leaning on the tool a little bit to help you craft your input is also something that's really helpful. And so the output of this would likely come in the format of an outline for a creative brief. Again, you could tweak it from there. And we always recommend making sure that you have your eyes on it as the expert to make sure that everything makes sense. But this can do a great job at getting you a first draft or an outline that you can then react to and spend your time really putting strategic thought into how to make it better versus having to invest your time in sort of copying over information and formatting a brief. Another example, a great way to leverage AI is to help analyze data, especially if you're using a platform that you feel really good about the security of it and feel comfortable sharing campaign data or other reporting back into it. AI can be a great way to sift through a ton of numbers and come to really meaningful insights that can help you plan better campaigns, better understand what worked and what didn't, and plan for the future. So, for this, we like to use a tool called Accio, which is sort of an AI-powered BI tool. So you're able to upload any data set into Accio, and then it has a chat explore functionality that is essentially built on one of the OpenAI models. So you can chat with your data in the same way that you would engage with ChatGPT in other instances. So it's a really great way, if you're not an analyst yourself, as many of us as marketers are not, you can lean on the tool to help do some of the heavy lifting around formatting and structuring the data, and then it frees up your time to just be able to ask questions of the data set and get those answers really quickly versus having to manipulate a ton of data sets to find what you're looking for. So we often use this to evaluate the effectiveness of a completed campaign or even mid-flight or after a month that it's been live, making sure that everything's running properly. So you can use AI to help you analyze performance, compare current results to past results if you're able to provide those, get some deeper questions and next step recommendations. So maybe if you want to review performance and have AI help you think of some questions that you might take back to your agency or media partner so that you can have a collaborative conversation with them about how to make results better. It also does a really good job of helping you anticipate stakeholder questions. So if you know that you're going to take a report back to your clinical leadership, it can do a nice job of kind of ideating what questions they might ask of you or what concerns they might have, what they might want to hear about next so that you can be really prepared for that conversation. And it can also help you set benchmarks to understand what performance should look like in the future. So on the right, we have just a couple of prompts here to give you an example of how we engage with Accio. So we're being very specific, again, identifying key changes in paid media performance, giving it the time period that we want it to look at, and specifying the metrics that we want to focus on, but leaving it to the process of figuring out how best to get to those answers and then returning them to us so that we can give feedback and iterate on it from there.
Elise, we have our first question.
Yeah.
It's an easy one. I'll take it. The question is, will you be sharing these slides following the presentation? The answer is yes. So there's a lot of good, thorough information and examples Alicia's sharing. We will share the slides as you see them, recording of the presentation, and some additional resources that add depth and context to the concepts and examples we're sharing today. So some of those I'll touch on a little bit later. Shortest answer, yes. We'll be sharing the slides and some additional resources after the presentation this afternoon.
Great. All right, and then one last example, and again, on the 15th, we're going to go through more of the complete process end to end of how to do some of these things using AI, but just to give you a sense of those prompting best practices applied in some of these use cases. Another one that I really like is using AI for competitive research because that can be really time consuming. There's a ton of different sources that you can pull information from to learn about your competitors and what they're doing in the marketing space, or even just as it relates to new treatment offerings, clinical trials, etc. AI can be a really helpful tool in that department, especially if you use ChatGPT at all. They more recently released their deep research functionality, and that I would say rivals Perplexity, which is another AI research tool. And it's nice because it's all in one place. So if you're a ChatGPT user, you can get some of that really great research functionality right at your fingertips. And it does a really nice job of combing the internet, finding the answers to your questions. So you could use use AI to gather some competitive intelligence. You might focus specifically on themes like messaging themes, understanding their service offerings, summarizing recent innovations, maybe even trying to pinpoint all of the different locations that your competitors offer so that you can understand geographic footprint. So here is an example prompt for competitive research that you might think about employing. So again, being really clear about what it is we're looking to achieve in conducting clinical research or competitive research, looking at their clinical research, advanced treatment options, etc., and then really clearly understanding how those programs are presenting themselves in the interest of us preparing to run a campaign. And so specifying what those competitors are, providing the URLs to their websites to give that context to AI, and then specifying exactly what we want from the output so that it knows that we are looking for messaging themes, tone, etc. If you leave that part out, you'll probably get some really interesting competitive research, and you'll probably have to go back and iterate and work with AI to make sure that you're getting specifically what it is that you're looking for. So that's where it's really helpful to be clear about what it is you're interested in, or it will just provide a really comprehensive summary that you'll then have to sift through and get to what it is that you're looking for.
So, Elise, we've got our second question. And as a backdrop for it, I'm going to go back one slide because this question is about Accio. And the question is, have we used Accio to analyze social media campaign results? And so maybe answer the question and provide how we might engage Accio to understand the effectiveness of a social media campaign.
Yeah, we definitely have. I would say Accio is really helpful. Examples I can think of would be if you're running a social media campaign across multiple platforms. So maybe you're live in Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok. Accio can be really helpful so that you can upload all of that data into Accio and then you can use it to help you sift through which of those platforms performed best, which was more cost effective, which saw the highest engagement rates, things like that that might take you some time if you were to manually compare the data sets from all of those platforms. It's helpful in that regard. We also often use it to evaluate creative performance. So if you run campaigns and you like to launch multiple variations of creative, it can be really time consuming to figure out which variations or messaging themes or images actually performed the best. And so exporting those reports at the creative level and letting Accio sift through all that data and just engaging with it and asking things like, what was the top performing messaging theme or which messaging theme actually led to conversions, things like that. Accio does a really great job of sifting through even like placement reports for programmatic to help you get to answers more quickly and kind of manipulate really cumbersome data sets in a way that's a lot more efficient.
Uh, Elise, we love Accio, and it seems to have gotten the attention of attendees today. So, one more question on the Accio front, and that is it possible to integrate Accio with platforms like Salesforce Marketing Cloud Intelligence to help run that data analysis?
I do know that they recently released some functionality around audience segments that I think requires a Salesforce integration. So there's likely some possibilities there. I would encourage you to reach out to Accio. They have really great customer service, and I'm sure would love to answer that question and something we can take as a follow-up to do more research on, but likely a capability there.
For sure. And it's something they're building out every day. I would say as potentially explore Accio for your own use cases and want to know how to get a hold of that excellent customer service that Elise has mentioned, we've got a really deep partnership with the folks over there. So if Fathom can ever be of assistance, that email with resources we'll send after the fact will also give you an opportunity to reach out and contact us. We exist, reach out. We're happy to help facilitate those introductions with partners in the space. And so, one more question relevant to this competitive research example. Amy asks, is Perplexity similar, the same, or different than ChatGPT?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say ChatGPT is much more robust than Perplexity. Within ChatGPT, the deep research functionality is most similar to what Perplexity does. So Perplexity is kind of solely, or I guess mainly, a research-based tool. So you can query it similar to how you would query Google, and it will return a really rich search result that just summarizes information that's readily available on the web, and it cites its sources, which was originally its key differentiator because chat would just give you the information and not tell you where it came from. Now, as it's gotten a bit more evolved, things like deep research, it cites its sources as well. So that's where I think chat is starting to rival Perplexity. And if you're already using ChatGPT or the Microsoft Copilot suite, you likely have a lot more tools already at your disposal and built into your ecosystem in those two tools. And so it likely doesn't make sense for you to also onboard something like Perplexity.
Thanks. There is one more question, but I think it might be better answered after the next section. I apologize. And this is Una asking about data privacy. Una, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And so the next section of content following this example is actually on privacy, compliance, and ethics. And so I'm going to save that question until after Elise shares a few more thoughts and considerations on that topic explicitly.
Sounds good. Great. So, yeah, we wanted to end with just a little bit around some best practices for adoption, specifically as it relates to things like privacy and compliance, because we know in the healthcare space that has been one of probably the biggest roadblocks to onboarding AI in a lot of cases, which makes sense, right? Given the sensitivity of the data that we all deal with from a healthcare standpoint. So, we wanted to talk a little bit about this as you experiment with AI and you start to get an idea of how you'd like to use it in your work. At that point is when we recommend starting to think more critically about the tools that you want to bring on. I think a lot of people take a tool first approach and they just start onboarding a bunch of AI tools without a clear vision of how they want to apply them to their work. And then they just end up with a ton of tools sitting around that aren't getting used to the fullest of their abilities. So definitely recommend starting with figuring out how you want to use AI and then thinking through some of these considerations that we're about to talk through to vet which tools then make the most sense for you to accomplish those things. So, first and foremost, some of the biggest concerns that we hear, especially in the healthcare space when onboarding AI, is how can I keep patient data secure and how can I make sure that I'm using AI in a way that is ethical and transparent? So, on the data security side, definitely want to make sure that you're vetting tools for HIPAA compliance and specifically onboarding tools that do provide assurances around security. One thing you'll want to look for is to ask if your level of partnership with the tool will allow them to remove your data from the training set. So, for example, if you're using ChatGPT Team, that level of subscription OpenAI will not use the data that you input into ChatGPT team to train the larger model. So you can feel secure about the privacy of the data that you're ingesting. That is just for your use and engagement in the platform and not something that is then being translated into all of ChatGPT. So there are definitely secure ways to use it. And if you were to just use the free version of ChatGPT, that would not be true. So that's why it's worth some research to figure out specifically at what level the security kind of guidelines are available. And then as it relates to ethics, definitely making sure that you prioritize transparency. So we always like to make sure our clients are fully aware of the health systems that we work with when we're using AI and when we're not. If we deliver something that AI was a big part of creating, we want to make sure that we're communicating that and would encourage you to do the same, as you're taking deliverables to your team or to leadership or internal stakeholders, having a conversation about the role that AI played in helping you get there just for the sake of transparency and helping others understand, what tools you're using in your work and making sure everyone feels comfortable with that. And then from a bias or brand voice perspective, that's sort of something that you can accomplish by way of providing context. So if brand safety or brand voice is something that's really important to you, definitely feel free to upload your brand guidelines into something like ChatGPT and allow it to learn from that. That's something that I've done internally here at Fathom. So anything I want to craft in Fathom's tone of voice, I get something that sounds like Joe Adams said it to me now because I've trained the model that well. So definitely encourage you to look at that. And then again, just reviewing everything and making sure that you feel confident in it and it's at the level that you would want it to be if you were to deliver it yourself.
And I can speak from experience. There have been multiple times where Elisa said, Joe, I've got something I think you're really going to like. Joe GPT helped me with it. And so I appreciate Elisa's transparency in those conversations. Elise, I think there's a point you made that is worth restating here. And this is tied to Una's question directly, which received a couple plus ones, and so lots of curiosity from the audience. And that curiosity is around data privacy. And if we're uploading data to any AI tool, is the AI tool then using our data to train the model or to inform other users?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in some cases, yes. In the free version of some of these tools, those protections are not in place. And so things that you upload into ChatGPT's free version is sort of fair game and then can be used to benefit other users. And so that's not an instance that we would recommend adding anything sensitive. If you are just uploading something that is already common knowledge, maybe like an outline for blog content or something that's going to end up on your public anyway, that is something that I would feel comfortable uploading. But if you are uploading more sensitive data, things that are not public knowledge, then you want to make sure that you have those proper security measures in place. And so that's where things like ChatGPT Team and a subscription with Accio come into play, because at that point, you're getting guarantees that your data is your data and it's not being used to train the larger model. It's just sort of existing in your specific interface.
Thanks, Elise.
Yep. Great. And then, so just some things to consider as you are onboarding tools. These are likely things that your IT department or others that you're going to work with to ultimately get approval to bring a tool on are going to ask of you. So, just some things that you can sort of do your due diligence on to understand in the onboarding process. Looking for things like their security controls, so policies or certifications, understanding what their privacy policy is, downloading things like SOC 2 compliance reports. Those are all helpful things to do at the onset of the vetting process to make sure that you can feel confident in the security of the tools that you're using. For anything that's well established, like a ChatGPT or a Claude or Perplexity, these things are all pretty readily available on their websites. It shouldn't be hard to find them. If you are looking at a tool that's newer, there are a ton of AI startups, as I'm sure you could imagine. It's often harder to find the documentation for some of those, but our experience has been that people are really willing to work with you and make sure that you get the information that you need. So it might just take a little bit of back and forth with a rep or someone over there to make sure that you're getting the right information. But these are generally the types of things that those who are approving the tools might be looking for some reassurance around privacy and security. And then lastly, just some general use guidelines. So if you have tools like ChatGPT Team that are approved, that everyone's using, that are secure, some of these are not as relevant, but if you want to err on the side of caution, I don't think it hurts to communicate these guidelines just across the board, at least as a starting point, so that you can feel confident that everyone who's engaging with AI is doing so in a way that aligns with your standards and what you view as secure for your organization. So some around data protection and privacy, it's good to put some guidelines in place for what types of data you can and cannot upload. So even in something like ChatGPT Team, you might not feel comfortable uploading specific patient or physician information. So setting some specificity around maybe things like campaign data are okay to upload into AI. Maybe you feel less comfortable uploading exports of patient lists or things like that. So setting some guidelines for your team around what you feel comfortable uploading and what you should stay away from. In cases where you have less sensitive data that you still want to be cautious of, we recommend anonymizing it. So just stripping your organization name from it or anything that could tie it back to you specifically. That's most helpful in if you're using like a free version of a tool that you feel less comfortable in. But again, if you want to err on the side of caution, you can definitely do that. You just lose a little bit of the context that would be shared with AI at that point, but that's something that you can definitely work around. And then make sure that you're documenting the sources and the type of data that you're using in AI, just so that you can provide clarity and visibility throughout your organization. If there are questions from leadership or what have you, you already have those answers at your fingertips and you can confidently speak to what it is you're sharing and what you're not. As it relates to accuracy and quality control, that's again where the human element comes in. So AI can generate some really great results that look awesome, and then you get into it and you realize that there are some inaccuracies or what are referred to as hallucinations, where the model just kind of makes something up. To give you an example, I was recently looking to pull a quote into something, and I asked it to do some research, and it gave me these quotes that just sounded amazing. And as soon as I copy and paste them into Google, no one had ever said them. So So just a word of caution to make sure that you are looking at the results from AI and making sure that they're accurate, and not only accurate, but that they feel strategically aligned with what you would want to deliver yourself as well. And then from a brand voice standpoint, again, making sure that you're using it as a starting point for things like messaging or blog content or other content. I wouldn't recommend necessarily just copy and pasting straight from AI and sending that out the door in the form of an asset. But it's definitely good to get a first draft to help you think about messaging and to be more strategic in that lens. And then just transparency, which we've already kind of hit on. Make sure that you're clearly communicating when you've used AI, just so everyone's on the same page and there's no surprises down the road when you're employing AI in your work. Great, and I will
Great.
turn it over to Joe.
So I'm going to walk through just a couple key takeaways, summarizing the conversation, share some additional resources, and then we'll jump into Q&A. Before I hit this content, do want to recognize there are two questions that we haven't answered yet. We'll hit those as we get into the general Q&A, so sit tight, and that'll be the start of our discussion then. But in terms of key takeaways, the first thing, and maybe the most common thing that Elise said today, is think about AI as your partner, right? A helpful tool with your expertise and guidance. If we're sort of trusting AI and its outputs to be that expert, to be the foremost thought leader, we will get in trouble. And so use it to multiply your impact, not replace it. As you engage with those tools, be as clear and concise as possible. So, ChatGPT and other tools are integrating empathy, especially in those voice driven tools, to make the experience more conversational and natural. Trust me, if you are direct with AI, it will not get offended. And so, clarity, brevity will help you get a better output from the start. There are a million, a billion, an infinite amount of ways that we might employ AI in our work and personal lives. One of my favorite applications is as a sort of sommelier in my pocket, right? Here, here are the wines I've enjoyed, and here are the food I'm thinking about eating, today or this week. What are some pairings you suggest, right? There are infinite applications for these tools that are only limited by your creativity. And in order to get the best results, we'd recommend starting with the things that you do every day and understand most deeply. So that way, when you bring your expertise and perspective to the conversation, you can provide your own gut check. Is this accurate or not? So that we're not starting to get outside the bounds of reality and putting these tools too much in the driver's seat. And finally, compliance is important, right? We're in healthcare. It is central to every conversation that we have, and it should be. What compliance shouldn't be is a barrier to understanding what's possible. And so, it's a little direct, the quote is, but one of my favorite quotes relative to AI is we shouldn't be worried about AI replacing us. We should be worried about somebody who knows how to use AI better than we do replacing us, right? And so I offer that as an encouragement to explore, to understand how these tools can be your sidekick as you do excellent work every day, right? A multiplier, not a replacement. We're going to get together again. Hope to see you on April 15th for AI 201, where we're going to share more specific and deeper use cases, workflows, processes, like how to actually do the work with the support of AI. This is a teaser for that. If you're hungry for more content in the meantime, we wanted to share just a few resources that have been helpful for us in our journey and that our clients have responded to positively as they've made progress themselves. First and foremost, the Marketing Artificial Intelligence Institute, they're an organization who's local to Cleveland, where our headquarters is. They're excellent people, and they've been at the forefront of AI for marketing applications since before day one. And so we really love the content and trainings that they're offering. They've got something for everyone, and they're willing to craft sort of content to support your team, regardless of where you are in your journey. They also have an exceptional in-person conference in the fall every year. And so would encourage you, if AI is important to you and your team, check it out. Deep Learning, HubSpot Academy, LinkedIn Learning. There are lots of great online self-paced learning opportunities available in the space of AI, and these are some of them that we found to be most relevant. I would also add a little plug for a Fathom piece of content. Last year, we developed AI Empowered, a guidebook for healthcare marketers exploring AI. It has checklists, templates, guidelines, frameworks, really applicable tools to help incorporate into your journey. You can find that at our website, fathomdelivers.com/AI empowered, and we'll make sure to include that as an attachment in the follow-up that we send after today's event. So with that, want to transition to Q&A, and we do have a couple questions yet addressed that we can start with. Elise, we talked about voice and brand a few times. Any tips that you would offer for training LLMs in different voices, in a brand voice, or maybe for a persona?
Yeah, for sure. So I would recommend sort of tactically having different threads in something like ChatGPT or Claude for each sort of voice that you'd like to mimic or represent. So if it's a brand voice, if it's the voice of the patient, of a stakeholder, I would have those live as separate threads so that they can build up context over time. That's one of the things about these LLMs is that they learn over time by the context and the ways that you engage with them. So I would start with providing things like a brand brief, if possible, or some information about the target audience. I would have it do some research on its own, asking it to use deep research to find information about the specific audience that you're talking about, or maybe even if you're looking to create something relevant to your brand voice, have it explore your website and then return to you what it thinks your tone of voice is, and then you can sort of correct it if needed. But it does a really good job of learning and categorizing some of that on its own, and then just continue to use those threads over time. So anything that you need to write in your brand voice, do it in that same thread so that over time it can get better and better and better at learning what your brand voice is and really iterating on it. So those are some tips that I would employ there.
And so I am Fathom's brand leader. I work closely with Elise, and I would echo everything she said, just in the way that me and my team are engaging with ChatGPT teams, especially is I maintain sort of a general brand thread that I've trained on some of the core elements of our messaging and voice. And then we have different threads for different applications, like Elise mentioned. And so, for us in our applications, is this to support sales outreach? Is it website content? Is it research on the marketing competition? And so that way, as Lise mentioned, chat is learning and adapting, and we're sort of getting more narrow in our focus together over time.
Yep. You could also build a custom GPT, which would sort of be a level up from having it on its own thread. You can provide a little bit more context up front with that, and then it gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you engage with it. So either of those routes, I think, would be a great starting point for exploring voice and applying that to different use cases.
And the second question, Elise, and so maybe a call to those of you with us. If you have a question, get it into the Q&A feature so we can make sure to address it. In the meantime, we'll address Scott's question, which is, it looks like his institution is using Microsoft Copilot. And so how can institutions that require Microsoft Copilot to be used instead of chat or other AI platforms integrate the concepts that we're sharing? So, any experience with Copilot, any considerations for using that tool specifically?
Yeah, so Copilot has a lot of the same functionality that we talked about. It just lives in slightly different formats. So, for example, Copilot Chat is sort of their equivalent to ChatGPT. It's actually all built on OpenAI's technology, so it functions essentially the same, even though it looks different on the front end. So anything for the most part that we described as being done in ChatGPT, you can accomplish something similar using Copilot Chat and then some, right? Because you're also able to use AI AI to do things like find information across all of your different SharePoint sites and what have you. And then Copilot also ingrains AI in a little bit more of a native way than we are able to access it just by going to something like Accio for data and Fathom Note Taker for recording meetings. Copilot is a little bit more ingrained in that tool set already. So a lot of the functionality that we talked about for Accio, those are all things that are AI features within Excel if you're a Copilot user. So it's just a little bit different in terms of how you get to the technology and what it feels like in terms of the experience of engaging with it. But you can do a lot of these same things. It's just built in a little bit more to the Microsoft ecosystem versus being unique platforms outside of it.
And so that wraps up the questions that we've received so far, or at least maybe one more question for you, for me. We're wrapping up AI 101. Um, and our goal was to help folks be more confident in their adoption, exploration, application of AI. Any final thoughts or considerations you would share with the group before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I would just say test it out and start with areas where you already feel really comfortable. So if there's a routine process that you follow every month or weekly and you find yourself spending time on it and something that you don't enjoy doing and you wish that you could just offload it to someone else, start there. That's a great place to engage with AI and see how it works firsthand in an environment where you feel really comfortable. You can quickly fact check and understand if it did the task the way that you wanted it to and then grow into more advanced use cases from there. But just getting started, even if it's something that's not work related, being a sommelier perhaps is a great way to get more comfortable with it.
Plus one. And so that wraps up the content. Cassidy, I see you pop on. Before you wrap it up for us, I would just like to say to the entire group, thank you so much for your time, attention, for the engagement with the questions. We're really looking forward to the session on April 15th. And if we can be helpful in the meantime, please, please, please reach out and reply to the email that we'll send with context and content from today.